Welcome to the 2020 Owner-Controlled Insurance Program, otherwise known as OCIP Overview. Thank you for joining us today. We have put together a presentation that will provide not only a overview of the entire program, plus some updates to some things that we're doing so that you and your campus can better understand how the OCIP program benefits your projects and projects system-wide. So for today's agenda, we're going to do some brief introductions. We'll go through the overview of the entire OCIP program, including any changes, and we're going to show some project workflows, which is an exciting opportunity to kind of show you how the entire process from beginning to end occurs. We're going to discuss the bid credit tracking, which is something of a remnant of the grandfathered process that we have. We'll share some exciting new resources that Alliant has brought to the table, such as RapX and other resources. And we're going to take a moment to discuss claims. We'll go through loss control and health and safety, and then we'll close with questions of this presentation. So, to introduce the CPDC OCIP team, you have myself, Edward Villanueva. I'm the Construction Program Manager at the Chancellor's Office, and Terry Carr, who's the Construction Program Administrator. Most of you are familiar with Terry because she's the one who most folks have been reaching out to. And on the Alliant side, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jim Hollabaugh, who's the Senior Vice President.
Thank you, Edward. Again, I'm Jim Hollabaugh. I manage our OCIP and CSIP, also known as wrap-up practice for the region for Alliant. And also on this call today, we have Pamela Kuros and Mo Davis. Pam is the program manager for the CSU OCIP for Alliant, and she's really the person that's responsible on a day-to-day basis for the success of the program. She's also the primary contact person for the campus project teams. Working underneath Pam that aren't shown on this slide, we have a number of different program administrators. And the program administrators, they are the primary contact for the actual contractors themselves in terms of enrolling in the program, getting any questions they have in regard to the program. The contractors usually go directly to the administrators. And they're identified in the kickoff meetings we have with each campus before a project, as well as in the insurance manuals that contractors receive. Mo Davis is our Director of Safety for the region. He's been very involved in the CSU program. He has a number of loss control team members that go out and visit the job sites and will coordinate with project teams and general contractors to do the site safety visits. But Mo is also will do some of those and is very involved in the program. Tyvon Hotzendorf, he is the primary claims contact. He personally does general liability claims, but we wanted one person to be able to triage claims as they come in the door, and so that person is Ty. We don't want campuses to have to try and figure out, well, is this a builder's risk claim? Is this a GL claim? Is this a workers' comp claim? Ty will perform that triage process for you and then quickly put you in contact with the appropriate claims person at Alliant. And on the workers' compensation side, that is Michael Quinn. Okay, next slide. So this is just a quick overview of exactly what our wrap-up is. I think most of you have had enough experience in this arena to have a general sense of what the program does. But if you compare it to a traditional program, which is represented by that top diagram with all those figures of each bringing their own workers' compensation and general liability and excess insurance to the table on a project and charging the university for that insurance. And on a large construction program like CSU's, that is not the most cost-effective approach to purchase insurance, and it also has some other important drawbacks. One is you have far less limits because generally you're going to require those contractors to bring maybe $2 million, maybe $4 million at the most in limits, versus the $100 million in limits that we have on our program that apply to every contractor of every tier. In this situation, you have multiple insurers. If there's a loss, you can have cross litigation. that drives up legal costs and the overall cost of the insurance for the program. You also have gaps in coverage. If the contract, you get a certificate of insurance from the contractors, but they don't, that could lapse, and you also don't know what exclusions they have in their policy. So these issues are all addressed through the OCIP. And the diagram below represents that, where CSU is procuring the insurance, the workers' compensation, the general liability, and excess liability for all contractors working on site that are eligible to enroll in the program. Now, there are a few contractors that we don't enroll in the program, and Pam's going to address that later in the presentation. But the advantages here is we have control, a single risk management program, substantial cost reductions, which we can talk about a bit later. Control of claims. There's a 10-year statute of repose in California. If you have a loss in year 8, year 9, do you really want to be chasing down the contractor that's responsible for that and then have them in control of the claim process with their insurance company? This way, through the OCIP, CSU is the first named insured, and working with Alliant, we'll work to make sure that claim is adjusted to the interests of the university. As I said before, we have far higher limits of insurance, consistent coverage across the board for every party, and it's also a coordinated loss control and claims approach. By having a single entity doing this, if we see some trends in the claims, we can filter that information to our loss control team, who can communicate that appropriately to the project, so that we can have a unified approach to fixing the situation. And we also have a larger contractor pool, because there may be some subs out there that, for whatever reason, small mom and pops, minorities, small businesses can't meet CSU's minimum insurance requirements. Well, they don't have to with the OCIP in place, because we're providing their insurance for them. Next slide. Why do we do the OCIP? This is just taking some of the key points I've already made and hitting it home. Again, control of claims for the duration of the statute of repose, very important. Broader coverage with higher limits. And also, I didn't mention this, it eliminates insurance as an issue for replacing a general contractor. If a general contractor brings its own CSIP to the table, and the university wants to replace them, if the general contractor goes, the CSIP goes with it, and then you're left hanging there without insurance and having to replace that. And generally, these programs perform better from a safety perspective, partly because of the coordinated claims and loss control approach. And it saves money in comparison to a traditional approach. We've looked at this multiple times in multiple ways. Most recently, I did a case study where we let Clark Construction have open competition with our OCIP for the San Diego State University Mission Valley site development project, and they were not able to compete from a cost perspective with the OCIP. Next slide. OCIP coverage overview. So there are a lot of different coverages out there involved on a construction project, and I just want to reinforce that the OCIP is really, it's general liability, and it's workers' compensation, and it's excess liability. Next slide. The other coverages, which are outside of OCIP but are provided for your project, are builder's risk, commonly known within the university as BRIP, Builder's Risk Insurance Program. And that requires a separate enrollment because it's separate from the OCIP. And you can contact Terry Carr about any questions you have around the BRIP program. We have contractors' pollution liability, which is for any pollution, sudden and accidental pollution exposures that happen on the project, and owner's protected professional indemnity. This is E&O coverage for the benefit of the university that sits above and beyond the practice policies that your architects, engineers, and other designers bring to the table. So in the 1.7% that is included, that you're being charged for the OCIP, it includes workers' compensation. It includes the CPL coverage, the pollution coverage, as well as the owner's protected professional indemnity. It does not include the builder's risk. That's a separate charge. Next slide. The OCIP program over time. So for those of you who've been around for a while, know there have been lots of changes. And let's go over to the far right and let's talk about where we're at now and where we're at going forward. So we're in OCIP 2, so it's the second OCIP that we've placed. And going forward, as of last year, we're using a net bid approach. That means contractors exclude their insurance costs from their bids, and then so the savings are realized by a reduced contract price. The campuses pay a flat percentage, and then those funds are funneled to CSURMA, which is the university's JPA, Joint Powers Authority, manages the insurance for the university, and then they pay the carriers. We also have some projects that are still gross bid, which gross bid means that the contractors bid with their insurance in their bids, and then we identify those costs and remove those through change orders, and then those dollars go to CSURMA to reimburse the funds that they have expended on the premiums. So the cost savings is really directed from the reduced contract price after you do the change orders. This is different from, so what we have today actually is in the net bid approach is what we had way back in 2011 when we launched this program. But there were some questions over time as to whether or not we were getting the value for the money. So we went to a gross bid approach, proved itself that the value was there. And so because it's so much less burdensome in terms of administration on everybody involved, the contractors, the project teams, Alliant, everybody, we went back to a net bid approach because it's the simplest, most straightforward, and we're confident that the university is getting the savings. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, the projects are assessed a charge of 1.7%. That is for the OCIP coverages as well as OPPI and CPL. BRIP is a separate program. The campus procurement and project management team are to ensure that the contract's general conditions use net bid approach, and we're no longer using the gross bid approach. If you have any questions about that at all, just contact us, contact Edward. We want to make sure that everyone is crystal clear on that issue, because it's very problematic if it's bid gross and we have to go back and try and unwind that. And again, if it's a grandfather project that was bid gross, we're handling those on a case-by-case basis, and we'll remove those costs through deductive change order. Next slide. Is your project eligible for OCIP? Well, if you have a project with a value of $10 million or more in hard costs, then it's eligible for enrollment in the OCIP. And the hard cost is defined as the total direct construction cost. Contractor's overhead and profit, site management fee, contingency, and allowances. It doesn't include any design or pre-construction costs. So those need to be removed. So we have a project identification sheet that is filled out in advance of being enrolled in the OCIP program, and this specifies how you need to calculate. This is repeated on that form. So to get your project enrolled, complete the project ID form, and then it's submitted to the Alliant Program Manager, which is Pam. Next slide. Pre-bid meetings. Pam, since you do these, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Jim. So one of the more important things that we're going to talk about today is really early notification of new projects to Alliant, or more specifically to me. In order to get your project started off on the right foot, it's important to have a strong foundation. And how can you do that? That's by having Alliant participate in any of your pre-bid meetings. During the pre-bid meeting, all we're really going to do is give a short presentation on OCIP, go over the program in general, and we really just want to give contractors the opportunity to review the program as a whole, and just so we can go over any kind of bidding expectations or go over any kind of coverage questions that they may have. Now let's look at how the billing process is going to look for the campuses on the next slide. All right, so as Jim mentioned, projects are now getting billed 1.7% again for OCIP and for any additional insurance coverages. So how does that billing process look for you guys at the campus? First, you're going to notify Alliant of a new project that's going to be enrolled into the OCIP. Once a quarter, Alliant compiles a report, which is known as the quarterly report, and that's going to include a list of all of the projects that were enrolled within that respective quarter. The report is then sent to CPDC for approval, and after their approval, CSERMA will send a bill to the campus for 1.7% against your initial construction value that's going to be due in full. So the only bill that you will ever see will come from CSERMA. The campuses will never see a bill that's going to come from Alliant or from the OCIP carrier, because the OCIP carrier is going to bill Alliant. Alliant is then going to bill CSERMA, and CSERMA looks to bill the campus or the project to recoup any kind of payment. After the project files a notice of completion, Alliant captures any kind of newly closed projects within the quarterly report. That gets also approved by CPDC, and if your project exceeds its original construction value by more than 5%, then just know that there will be an additional billing from CSERMA to the campus. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so who's enrolled? This is one of the more fundamental questions, and this really applies to your subcontractors. So who's eligible to participate and who isn't? Your basic rule of thumb is that for any contractor who is performing construction labor on the job site is eligible for enrollment into the OCIP. So some caveats to that rule. OCIP is not going to look to cover any kind of structural or heavy demolition where they're utilizing blasting or explosives. Basically, you're just bringing down an entire building and a structure. Any of your hazardous material contractors, your asbestos, your abatement work, any kind of transportation companies, we typically look to exclude. Any kind of professional services like your architects, your surveyors, your engineers, we typically look to exclude. If you have a surveyor, though, if for whatever reason, is going to be on site, throughout the duration of the project, and, you guys are worried about them more from a work comp exposure, they're going to be getting into every nook and cranny of the project, we can potentially look to enroll that, but the OCIP is not going to cover anything from a professional liability standpoint. Any kind of vendors or suppliers, off-site fabrication is always excluded. Your material haulers, your dump trucks, and your truckers, those are typically excluded. Another general rule of thumb is keep in mind, basically any subcontractor who's not performing any actual labor on the job site, we're going to look to exclude. Also, I want to note that the OCIP policy, the OCIP policy itself does have an EMR stipulation of 1.25. So what does that mean for you guys? Well, within your contract general conditions, it does state that any contractor should have, an EMR of less than 1.25. So just talking to you guys about our process through that. Anytime we see a contractor in excess of 1.25, this typically tends to happen with your second level tier subs or your third level tier subs. So basically what we do is we'll keep that enrollment on hold. We're going to send it to the project team, the CSU project team, and to your general contractor as well to give them a heads up. We'll let the project team know about the scope, and we'll be collecting the particular subcontractors' corrective action plans, their loss history, basically what they're doing to better their EMR. We'll flip that over to the project team. We'll wait for CSU's determination and to see if you guys would like to proceed with enrollment or not. And if you guys have any questions on that, we typically go over this as well during each and every kickoff meeting that we have, but of course, you're always welcome to contact me as well. All right, so now let's talk about the actual process of OCIP for our net bid projects. So this process that you see here should really be the process for all projects going forward, meaning that we're looking at net bids. We're not looking at doing our bid credit tracking projects anymore. So first, you're going to advertise your project. Campus and project management team should always check with your campus procurement team to make sure you have attached the most recent general conditions, the most recent supplementary general conditions, as they should be instructing all of your contractors to bid net of insurance or excluding those costs. So once we get to the post-bid pre-award phase, like I said earlier, please contact me to participate in any meetings with your potential general contractors so we can briefly discuss the OCIP and answer any questions that anyone might have. Once we get closer to the start of construction and once your general contractor has been selected, we'll need to actually enroll your project into the OCIP. So that's done through the project identification sheet, which is what Jim talked about earlier. Basically, it's just going to ask for the project name, contact info at the campus level and your project team level, a description of the project and what that direct construction cost amount is. Something also important that I want you guys to know is that your project can be enrolled into the OCIP prior to a notice to proceed being issued. So if your project team needs to get on site for any kind of early mobilization or anything like that, we can look to have the OCIP start earlier if needed. So in order to start that process, please contact me. You'll want to make sure to fill out that project ID sheet. And then of course, I can guide you guys through any next steps. After we get the basic information about your project, we're going to start looking to coordinate a kickoff meeting with, of course, the CSU project team, with your general contractor, with the OCIP carrier, and with the Alliant OCIP team as well. Typically, we have this meeting about 1 month prior to on-site construction, so all of the topics that we talk about are fresh in everyone's minds as you guys are ready to get your project started. After our kickoff meeting, the Alliant team starts getting into the administration aspect of enrolling all of your subcontractors into the OCIP and making sure that everyone is covered. Throughout the project, there is going to be issued change order work, of course. Because this is a net bid project, all insurance costs are being excluded from bids, from change orders, from contracts. So you just want to make sure that your subcontractors are not bidding any of their work or change orders as gross or including those insurance costs, okay? Once we start nearing the completion of the project, we'll look to start the closeout process for your subcontractors by collecting any kind of final dates on site, as well as the final contract value. And once we have all of your subcontractors closed, we'll consider the project closed. All right, so that's about it for our net bid project. So let's go ahead to the next slide to talk about our grandfathered gross bid project. All right, so a natural question for you may be, well, what's the difference between gross bid, net bid, and are the processes the same or not? So right off the bat, you know, without even really read anything, that you can already see that there's a lot more steps associated just right within this slide, which basically translates to more work from everyone. There's a little bit more of an administrative effort that goes into our gross bid credit tracking projects because we're actually dealing with monies and credit change order. So whereas for your net bid project, we're looking to exclude any insurance costs from bids or from subcontractors. For your gross bid project, we're looking to include those costs and collect any associated costs through a deducted change order. Since we shouldn't have any more gross bid credit tracking projects, steps 1 through 3 don't necessarily apply, but in general, this would look the same as for our net bid project. The real difference comes in when Alliant starts with the OCIP administration, as we would look to enroll your subcontractors and then verify any insurance costs for your subcontractors enrolled into the OCIP. What would have then happened is that once we got to about 70 to 80% of enrolled CV, or maybe for some projects you guys saw 50% of project completion, CSU would have looked to perform the first deductive change order, which would have been based on estimated payroll and initial contract value. As the project went on, change orders would have been issued and also should have included insurance costs so we could do a final deductive change order once the project was ready to close out. Any monies that were collected as part of bid credit tracking would have either been kept by the campus or by CSERMA, and that really depends on who funded the cost of OCIP in the beginning. So as you can see, again, a lot more steps, some more administration for gross bid projects, which is why we are really reverting back to the net bid approach to simplify the process, you know, for the campuses and for the contractors all going forward. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide to talk to you guys about some of the resources that you have. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the Alliant RapX Owner GC portal. This is our Alliant RapX system, and it's our main hub for tracking all of your subcontractors on the project, who's enrolled, and all that good stuff. The system is internet-based, so you can use it on Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, whatever you guys like. But through this portal, CSU and any of your general contractors would have the ability to generate various reports. I'll get to those in a little bit. and track where all of your subcontractors are at in the enrollment process. If you'd like access to this, please contact me via email and I can get you guys set up. All right, so moving on to the next slide. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, some reports that you can run out of the RAPEX system. Some of the more popular reports from the CSU project teams would be the payroll report, which can be in Excel or PDF, and really either in a summary format for the project as a whole, or you can do a complete breakdown by work comp class code by every subcontractor that you have out on the job site. The payroll report's also going to include the man hours by month or by class code, so you can really manipulate the data however you'd like. You can also run an EMR report or an enrollment status report with the EMRs attached to them line by line, missing data reports to see what your subcontractors may be missing from their enrollment. And also, if your project is a grandfathered big credit tracking project, you'd be able to run a wrap-up credit report. Now, for something that's a little bit new that you guys might not know about, let's talk about that on slide 18. This is our Alliant RAPEX app. So this app is available in both the Apple Store and the Android Marketplace. And all you have to do is literally search for Alliant RAPEX and it's going to pop up. What's nice about this app is that it is real-time data. It's tied to any access that you may have to the owner and GC portal that I just talked about. And it provides the primary contact for every subcontractor. So through this app, you can look up your subcontractors, see if they're enrolled or not, see if they're eligible to be working on the job site or not. And this is going to be really helpful, let's say, for your project site superintendent, maybe they're just walking around the job site. They're going to be able to immediately point out who's eligible to be on site or not. This also helps if somebody doesn't want to rely on the paper enrollment status report. Because this is real-time data, you're getting updates constantly. So in theory, you could actually kick off a subcontractor who's ineligible to be on the job site, have their home office complete their OCIP enrollment. And again, because the app is real-time, if that subcontractor completes their OCIP enrollment, you'll be able to immediately see if that subcontractor is eligible to start working on site again. All right, so let's talk about some even more resources that are available to the campuses on slide 19. All right, so of course you have the CPDC OCIP team. You have Edward Villanueva and Terry Carr, as well as the Alliant service team. Aside from that, you can also have Alliant attend any of your project coordination meetings, your pre-bin meetings. You also have the CPDC website. And something that we're working on is going to be the Campus OCIP Starter Packet, which is going to include a list of frequently asked questions that we pulled from all of the campuses. It's going to include that project identification sheet, which is, of course, the first step of getting your project enrolled into the OCIP. And it's also going to contain any kind of resources from a claims perspective within the website itself as well. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, roles and responsibilities. So I'm not going to go into every line item here, but as you can see, Alliant holds the majority share of responsibilities. Alliant manages the OCIP administration process for the campus, for all of your subcontractors. So if you feel like you're doing too much, it might be because you are. So please feel free to reach out to us if you ever need anything or you just want to talk about the processes again. All right, moving on to the next slide. I am actually going to hand it back to Jim so he can talk to you guys about the different claims that we see.
Thanks, Pam. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different claim situations on construction sites and many different lines of coverage that are tailored to cover each kind of loss that can take place. So I just want to give you guys a quick overview of the various types of claims that you may see to help you identify what you have on your hands should something happen. So general liability. So this covers third-party bodily injury and property damages arising out of premises operations. So in other words, let's say a person who is not an employee who's not a construction employee, is a third party, is walking down the street adjacent to a project, student, someone, and something falls off the building and injures them. That's a general liability claim. Now, the general liability form also covers construction defects during the statute of repose. So if, let's say, for example, you have pipes that are leaking and it's creating substantial amount of damage to drywall, carpeting, floors. Water intrusion is a common issue and can be very costly. So for the full statute of repose, the full 10 years after the end of construction, if that pipe is leaking because the contractor improperly installed it, there is coverage. Now, it's not going to, the policy is not going to cover the repair of the pipe itself that the contractor installed in a faulty manner, because insurance doesn't cover faulty workmanship in that sense, but will cover all of the resultant damage from those leaking pipes. Workers' compensation. This is, I'm sure most of you realize, this is for injury to workers on the job site during the course of employment. It doesn't cover them if they're off site, not working at night, but when they're on the job site and they're injured, this provides coverage, and the benefit, or the benefits as well as the limits, are statutory. There's no top limit to these policies. Excess liability. So the general liability policy is in layers. You have the primary policy of, say, 2 million and 4 million, and then we build excess layers on top of that. So in this case, we've built all the way up to 100 million. So if you have a general liability claim, we have $100 million of coverage for that loss. And those limits are restated annually, and then they're restated again for the completed operations period. So there's a great deal of insurance here for the protection of the university. Builder's risk. So this is property insurance, which covers damage to the actual property under construction only during the course of construction. If it happens after the project is completed, that's the university's property policy. That's not builder's risk. Builder's risk is just for, say, if there's a fire during the course of construction, builder's risk is going to cover that claim. Contractor's pollution liability. So this is third-party claims, liability claims should there be a pollution incident that stems out of the construction process. Say, for example, a contractor is digging, they run into some sort of pollutant, and then that pollutant actually causes some damage by, say, it runs off onto an adjacent property and causes damages, then CPL, Contractor's Pollution Liability, provides coverage for that claim. And finally, owner's protected professional indemnity. I spoke a bit about this earlier. This is coverage for design errors and omissions. So that pipe loss that I described earlier under general liability, if it wasn't due to the contractor improperly installing that pipe, if it was due to the fact that the pipe that was specified by the architects or engineers was not the right pipe for this particular use, then that's a design error and omission, because it's the fault of the architect or engineer, not the fault of the plumber. So initially, you're going to go after the design error and omission coverage of the design consultant themselves. But unfortunately, we often see those limits are eroded by the time we have a loss. So to protect the university, we've purchased this OPPI policy, which sits above the architects and engineers, designers policy, to protect the university should those limits be eroded. So if you have a design issue, or if there's any kind of loss, you're going to work with us. You don't have to figure out exactly what type of claim it is. Like I said, that's one of the things Alliant is here for, and we're here for you for the full statute of repose. If there's a loss, you go to Ty von Hutzendorf. He'll triage that loss and make sure it goes to the appropriate person within Alliant to assist you, as well as the appropriate carrier, so we can file a claim.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right. So let's move on to slide 22 so we can talk a little bit more about work comp claims. So the work comp jail carrier for the OCIP is Old Republic, or ORCIG. Tongue twister there. And their claims are handled by a third-party administrator known as Gallagher Bassett. For every project that is enrolled into the OCIP, ORCIG, or Gallagher Bassett, they're going to produce a claims kit that's going to outline the claims reporting process and where claims are to be reported to. If you actually look towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Old Republic claims reporting number that will include CSU's client code and BDN number, which you will need in order to report the claim. Additionally, ORCIG will provide a list of clinics like hospitals, urgent care clinics, doctor offices that will immediately surround the project site, I believe within a 10-mile radius. And these are approved clinics that are under the MPN network. ORCIG is also going to attend any kind of kickoff meetings with CSU, with the general contractor, and they're also going to further describe the claims reporting process as well. In addition, a safety representative from ORCIG will visit the job sites either monthly or every other month with CSU and with the Alliant site safety team as well. For additional resources and contacts, I've also included Old Republic's Claims Director, Veronica Herrera, whom you can contact if you have any questions in regards to your claim or for any catastrophic claims, as well as Mike Quinn, who is Alliance Work Comp Claim Specialist, and he works really closely with the ORCIG team, and of course, Veronica and Gallagher Bassett. Now let's take a more step-by-step look at the overall claims reporting process if you do experience a work comp claim at your project on slide 23. All right, so most of this is overseen by your general contractor or your on-site project team, but from a campus perspective, you guys are really the enforcer, and you're gonna wanna reinforce any kind of compliance when it comes to the claims reporting process. When an injury occurs, we'll want to make sure that all of the reference forms have been obtained and to get treatment at a medical facility that's designated under the MPN. Subcontractors are responsible for reporting the claim to Gallagher Bassett, and they should really be reported within a 24-hour time frame. Typically, the expected turnaround time of getting a claim number or maybe an assigned adjuster or just that initial contact made is typically within 24 to 48 hours. And I believe the quickest method of just, submitting your claim and getting all of that information is by calling it in directly. You're also going to want to make sure that you follow up with the injured worker, accommodate any kind of modified duty, and ensure that they get the follow-up care that they need. And lastly, any kind of claim questions that you have can, of course, go to your Gallagher Bassett claims adjuster. And any kind of procedural questions or issues that you might want to talk about a little bit more can go to Mike Quinn, again, Alliance Work Comp Claim Specialist. All right, so next I want to talk to you guys about the Gallagher Bassett Treatment Authorization Form on slide 24. This form is very important when any contractors basically need to go to the clinic. We'll be looking for the campus to assist with making sure that contractors are compliant with any kind of injury protocol. The reason why this form is important, it's because it ensures proper billing under the OCIP and proper loss coding to the correct subcontractors. So for example, we have seen in the past where maybe ABC Plumbing went to the clinic, said that they were working for one of their general contractors on a CSU project, and then the claim was reported incorrectly to the general contractor. When claims are reported like that, it's unintentional and it can be fixed. But of course, it could also negatively impact your general contractors or other subcontractors who might not actually be responsible for the loss. So of course we can fix it, but it's better that it just, doesn't happen in the first place. So that's where this form steps in. It tells the clinic where exactly to submit the billings, which is you can find at the bottom of the page, and it lists the important and need to know information for the clinic, which is any field that's highlighted in yellow. So this should really accompany any worker who may be going to the clinic and should stay at the project site or the designated primary clinic in case any subcontractor goes to the clinic directly without letting anyone know. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So general liability claims. So while these don't happen as often, when they do happen, it tends to seem more like a bigger deal. So we want to make sure that we have all of the right steps and all of the right resources if you do experience a GL claim at your job site. From a general liability perspective, you're going to want to involve Zach Gifford, CSU's Director of System-Wide Risk Management, and Ty Van Hussendorf, who is Alliance GL Claim Specialist. Between Zach and Ty, they have actually collaborated and created some resources for the campuses to reference, which will be found on CPDC's website. Some of those documents being the GL incident handout, the CSU claim forms, and definitions, as well as the OCIP GL loss form. And let's go ahead and look at some of the steps we should be following when it comes to the actual claims reporting process for general liability claims. All right, so when it comes to GL claims, one of the best things I can really tell you is to make sure you document and photograph everything. You'll also want to identify any of the involved contractors, as well as identify upfront the person who's most knowledgeable at the campus level. So once you gather all of the required information, you're going to want to send all of this to both Zach and Ty. I also just want to make mention, and as Jim talked about earlier, if your claim involves some kind of property damage to a project that is actively or currently being built, then that is considered to be a builder's risk claim, not a general liability claim. But of course, Ty, will kind of help you guys as far as any next steps and which direction you should go in. From a campus perspective, please make sure to cooperate with your adjuster and to let them investigate the loss. You also want to make sure to review the general conditions, as there is a contractor obligation for any kind of general liability related claims for any involved contractors. Lastly, if there's any form of water damage, you're going to want to contact a remediation company. Remediation companies are not covered under the OCIP, so the campus is responsible for making the repairs and doing the dry down. And of course, any kind of claim questions can go to your adjuster, and any kind of procedural questions or issues that you guys want to talk about more can go to Ty. All right, and with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to Mo to talk to you guys about loss control at the job site.
Loss control, plan for safety and excellence, probably the most important piece of our OCIP program. As is the case for most construction sites, the general contractor is responsible for project safety. But there are certain expectations that the California State University expect of those people working on our job sites. And those safety expectations are outlined in your OCIP safety manual. If you haven't taken a look at that OCIP safety manual yet to this particular point, I encourage you to do so, as a lot of the elements specific to safety are outlined in that specific manual. The first item we're going to talk about is the general contractor development of a site-specific safety plan. The contractor needs to develop a site-specific safety plan for the project. We're not looking for their entire IAPP or their company safety or corporate safety manual. What we're actually looking for is a document specific to the job site. The plan needs to be submitted to the Alliant OCIP safety representative for that particular site at least 15 days prior to initiation of construction activities. Some of the items that we're looking for in that particular document are assignment and accountability and 24-hour contact information of personnel responsible for safety on the project, basic scope of work evaluation, a site logistics plan, and probably will also include a COVID prevention plan because of our new normal, unfortunately, a fire prevention program, emergency response and evacuation plan, and if applicable, a public protection plan. So those are all elements that we'll be looking for. We'd like to have that submitted, again, 15 days prior to the inception of construction. Subcontractor project-specific safety orientation by the contractor. The contractor is responsible for orientating all of its own employees, plus all subcontractor employees on the site. Project orientation by the contractor is required before any employee can receive a project-specific hard hat sticker and enter the field. And that responsibility is going to be on the contractor to provide that sticker. The purpose of the orientation is to provide employees awareness of what they can expect and actually what's expected of them on the site as well. A general scope at a minimum should include drug testing policies and a consent form signed by the employees. And it's very important that the consent form does get signed, and there's a sample consent form on the back of our OCIP safety manual. Employee safety requirements and policies, making sure that they understand those expectations. Site-specific safety and health rules, if there's anything above and beyond by the contractor. Permitting procedures, including work permits, excavations, confined space, hot work permits, lockout, tagout, would be also an element that we'd like to see. Orientated hazard communication, and emergency alarm and evacuation procedures are also going to be very important. Where are our muster points? Is the actual system that we're going to utilize for potential emergency evacuation? And unfortunately, again, like I said before, unfortunately, a COVID prevention plan should also be incorporated. Periodic job site drug testing. This is a unique system that we have here with the Cal State University OCIP. On our job sites, all employees, 100% of the contracted and subcontractors working on the project site on selected days, periodically during the course of the project, shall be required to submit to drug screening with oral swabs. CSU employees, delivery people, visitors, and others not assigned to the site should not be screened or tested. These oral swabs, the oral swab drug screens will be administered by a testing agency and paid for by the OCIP. So there's no concern for anybody else to do that. We'll take care of that. The testing and testing agency will be procured by the OCIP. And Alliant Insurance, the contractor or construction manager, will estimate the maximum amount of employees on the job site on any specific day for those testing procedures, and we'll make sure that we procure the testing kits and the actual technicians for that specific date of testing. So that responsibility will fall on us. Testing and screening and testing days will be determined by the Alliant and the CSU construction manager, with notice to the contractor on the morning of the actual screening or testing date. When notified, the contractor shall assemble a roll sheet of all people on the site on the day of screening. Screening should take place at the end of the workday when possible. Actually, immediately, prior to workers leaving the site. But if contractors want to massage that a little bit, we can talk about that as well. Contractors really should schedule the order of screening to minimize the impact of work on site. And any worker on that roll sheet not present at the screening has to be screened before they can return to work with a negative result. So if all of a sudden somebody gets, all of a sudden, hey, we're going to have a periodic screen today, and somebody says, hey, listen, I've got to take off, I've got to go somewhere, I've got a doctor's appointment, or whatever other reasoning might come up, and they aren't screened, they cannot return to work until they are screened and have a negative result. All workers on the roll sheet that do not pass any screening process may not be allowed back on the work project until properly cleared per the OCIP specifications. And also, folks, any overtime associated with this testing is the responsibility of the employer of that employee. This is all part of the contractual specifications of the program. Moving on to the next bullet point, dedicated contractor, subcontractor safety coordinators. Each contractor and subcontractor of any tier shall have a designated safety representative available at the site, assigned the responsibility of managing all aspects of safety related to employees under their direct control. Now, these duties can be performed by a field superintendent or foreman having the required training, experience, and qualifications listed in the actual OCIP safety manual. And I encourage you to please take a look at what those qualifications are. These employees usually can have other duties provided appropriate adherence to state and local laws, ordinance, codes, regulations, and are actually OCIP manual or followed by personnel under their control. There may be instances on the site, depending on the crew size, where the duties of the safety representative may become dedicated. And again, in which there may be other duties, in which there may be no other duties related to the position other than safety. Again, please refer to your OCIP safety specifications regarding those elements if they're applicable to those specific roles. The contractor or subcontractor safety representatives must have specific qualifications, I kind of touched on that before, associated with the position, such as certain construction outreach training, CPR first aid certification that's current, applicable years of experience depending on what their role is, understanding of the project safety specification, incident investigation, knowledge, authority, and the ability to communicate to their field personnel are going to be the elements that, again, we definitely are looking for that safety representative. Some of the program contract documents are a little bit more stringent than you might be ordinarily dealing with as far as from an OSHA perspective. An example of some of those things might be 6-foot fall protection for all trades. There are no exceptions. There are specific PPE requirements that are expected of personnel coming on the job site. Some of those items are hard hats, safety glasses with side shield protection to meet the ANSI specifications, the drug testing, return to work, and drug testing requirements we talked about earlier. And there's actually a return to work program, which we'll talk about a little later on in this slide. So again, take a look at your safety manual, make sure you understand the elements of our safety program that may exceed your Cal OSHA specifications, to make sure that you're adhering to those expectations, that everyone working for you or under you understands those expectations. Regular oversight and support from the corporate safety or contractor, subcontractor, while we know it's the responsibility of each individual to work safely, it's ultimately the contractors and subcontractors' responsibility to see that all rules, safety and health and practices are followed and enforced. Active participation by a contractor and subcontractors in construction safety and loss prevention programs is definitely mandatory of this particular program. Contractors and subcontractors of any tier must demonstrate to their employees complete support and continuing involvement in all safety and loss prevention efforts. And that's really what we're looking for those particular departments. Again, supporting our efforts and the expectations of the OCIP on our job site. Tailgate meetings, again, it's usually from a college perspective, at least you're required to have tailgate meetings in construction every 10 days. We're requiring that you have tailgate meetings on a weekly basis. So we're requiring the supervisors to conduct tailgate or tailgate safety meetings or equivalent with their crews at least every 7 working days, again, to emphasize safety and the importance of safety on our particular program. One of the elements you might not be used to, but definitely needs to be incorporated into this particular program and is specific to an OCIP, is an active return to work program. Each employer shall have a written early return to work program that should be implemented on this project, unless specifically prohibited by some terms of a collective bargaining agreement. And if that's the case, again, we'd like you to bring that to our attention and see if we can't work things out. Basic benefits of a return to work program could be, effectively impacts employers' experience modification rate and contributes to reduced insurance premiums. A lot of people think that because of an injury, if an injury happens on an OCIP, it doesn't affect their individual mod, which is not the case. Again, it definitely does. So having a return to work program can help with that process. It can help eliminate vocational rehabilitation, boost employee morale, demonstrate that an employer wants to cooperate with the injured worker. And quite honestly, a worker on transitional duty can be of value to employer. If you're doing other items on the job site that aren't specific to those particular work duties. Alliant Safety Resources. Again, Alliant Safety role as the administrator of the program is really to serve as an OCIP representative for the university. We're kind of their eyes and ears. Again, making sure that job site activities, observations are in compliance with the project safety policies and procedures that we talked about before. We'd also like to be viewed as a helpful resource, hopefully, on the job site and a willing partner for contractors and subcontractors should they have any questions or situations come up within the program where experiential knowledge may be helpful to provide recommendations or resolutions. Again, our goal here is to support the California State Universities in making sure we have a great program. The OCIP Frankfurt safety representatives on the job site, which include those from Alliant, reserve the right really to audit the project site at their discretion. We'll definitely work with you. We typically call or contact contractors in advance, usually a couple weeks out, and let you know that we're coming. Visits in conjunction with the carrier safety representative will be at least monthly in most cases, and will be arranged so that the timeframes aren't disruptive to your work schedule. Project-specific check-in policies with contractors are expected to be followed and will be followed by your safety representatives. Any surveys, though, made on a job sites or premises by Alliant are really not intended to detect all potential causes of loss, codes violations, or really exceptions to good work practices, and don't relieve the contractors or subs on our job sites of any responsibility to identify and correct any unsafe working conditions. Really, Cal State Universities or Alliant Insurance Services really don't assume any liability because of us conducting or providing any of those such services. So really looking forward to working with you folks from a safety work environment. And thank you.
All right. And so that about does it for our presentation today. If you guys have any questions or anything else that you want to talk about further, please feel free to email the Alliant team. Please feel free to email me, the CPDC team, so we can better assist you guys going forward. And thank you for listening in, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right. And with that, we conclude our presentation of the 2020 OCIP program. Again, just really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. And hopefully you learned a few things that you can take away from and improve your capital projects. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email any of us. We'd love to hear from you. And however we can better assist your project delivery, we'd love to be part of that. Thanks again.